Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine
What's
a light
your
on
story?
incredible. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. These are conversations with disability changemakers and leaders helping to build a more inclusive world. My name is Superior Arden. I head up accessiBe's nonprofit partnership program, and I'm very excited for today's guest, Dean Bragonier. So welcome, Dean.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm super excited to dive in. Can you tell us about yourself and about NoticeAbility?
Sure. I guess for the sake of this conversation, the most relevant data point is that I'm a person with dyslexia and had the good fortune of being diagnosed very early back in the 1970s, which is a really progressive agenda for diagnosis, which still eludes many people today. I was had the great benefit of getting all of the diagnosis and the reading intervention and the structured literacy that is prescribed to be the panacea for people with dyslexia. But I realized both at the time and now in hindsight that that is a somewhat oversimplified equation, that the impact of being a person with dyslexia, of perceiving myself as broken or stupid or somehow deficient, was not deflected. It permeated every aspect of my educational experience, even though I was getting what is prescribed as the necessary tools for a person with dyslexia. And so if you fast forward many years, many decades later, I became a father. My wife is dyslexic, so we knew we were having a purebred dyslexic. And I really had this moment of reflection where I recognized that my son, who would be dyslexic, was going to go into an educational system that was still quite antiquated in the way it dealt with people like me and my wife. And so my responsibility was to take what I had learned, both through my educational journey, identifying what was deficient during that path, as well as recognizing the attributes that I had discovered as a young entrepreneur that were directly correlated to me having dyslexia. And so, a long story short, I created NoticeAbility. There is double entendre, no disability, NoticeAbility, with the intention of introducing students with dyslexia to what they do well, introducing them to the emerging neuroscience around the cognitive advantages associated with dyslexia, and also create courses that focus on those professions where dyslexics are disproportionately successful. And the goal, while certainly to teach the four course topics that we do, entrepreneurship, engineering, architecture, and the arts, was really more subtle. It was more geared towards giving kids the social and emotional structure and learning that they need in order to bolster their self-esteem and understand what makes them so powerful and valuable, so that they could both have a context for education and also have resilience that is derived from a better understanding of their true value, maybe not what our educational system currently places value on. So, as always, when you talk to a dyslexic, or at least this dyslexic, you'll get a longer answer than you probably anticipated. But I think I hit most of those question points there.
You started off wonderfully, and this is why I'm so excited to speak with you, because we have a lot to cover. And I think two words that really stood out to me as sort of a continuum was from the deficiency to the resilience. So being diagnosed in the 70s must have been pretty wild. I mean, what were sort of the reactions to that, and how do you think that has changed over time?
Well, I guess I don't remember the reactions to my diagnosis as much as I remember my reaction to my diagnosis, which was, and goes to the crux of this label versus no label, disclosure versus non disclosure, is I was given a very good explanation by my mother specifically that my brain works differently in some ways, and that can both be a challenge and an advantage. And so the context, the ability to hang my difficulty on something that was a part of me, but not all of me, allowed me to externalize to a degree the challenges. And I just said how I still internalize the narrative that I was broken and stupid. And that probably is in part due to the environmental and circumstances of my education, which means that, sure, I might have been getting that support at home, but that didn't mean that we had teachers that understood dyslexia or understood what I needed. And, I'd like to say that miraculously all that has changed, whatever, 50 years later. But the unfortunate thing is it really hasn't. It has in pockets, and those pockets are usually in private education or incredibly well resourced public education environments. But the reality is that those uh, graduate schools that are training teachers of today still fail to spend sufficient time on dyslexia. And so the educational environment isn't where it needs to be. It is getting better, but it is still a circumstance where the individual has to muster the resolve to push against the narrative that is fed to them by teachers and administrators, which is usually not very supportive.
So, what is something that you wish people knew, maybe our audience, about dyslexia?
I mean, the statistics, the words that I can't say right now are very both compelling and depressing. Right? We understand that arguably 15 to 20% of the global population has dyslexia, but at the same time, 50% of adolescents involved in juvenile justice have a learning difference, usually dyslexia, as well as 60% of adolescents involved in drug and alcohol abuse. So the idea is that if this continues to be neglected, we're not going to be able to see much of a dent in those numbers. On the other side of the ledger, we also know that 40% of all self-made millionaires are dyslexic, or all 35% of entrepreneurs. Now, these are stats, these are outcomes, but what I think lies beneath that surface is the fact that in a truly evolving global economy, advantage lies in ingenuity. And so when you are neglecting to foster the confidence of those who have a unique perspective on life, may that be dyslexia or ADHD or people with Asperger's or other spectrum, it is not only a disservice to the individual, but it is an opportunity cost to our global community. So, what is the one thing that I wish people would understand? Well, there's an untapped resource that's currently being siphoned off in the school to prison pipeline and drug and alcohol rehabs, when in actuality, if we know how to embrace these individuals, we're going to see job growth, we're going to see innovation and economic stimulation, in addition to the number one paramount impact, which is individuals who feel good about who they are.
That was a wonderful message, and I can't wait for everyone to hear it. So, with that being said, what do you think brands and businesses can do more regarding accessibility? Do you have a message about their inclusion missions or strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the rote response would be that everybody deserves a seat at the table. We need to do what's right. We are a true melting pot that incorporates not just race, gender, and ethnicity, but it incorporates neurodiversity. But I'll attack it from a different line and say, look, if you're a business and your job is to make money, you have competition. If you want an advantage over your competition, embrace the neurodiverse. It's as simple as that. When it comes to research, I'd much prefer to work with somebody who has Asperger's, who has an incredible ability to get highly focused, granular data points, and then have a dyslexic who is big picture thinking, and the two of them merge, and you've got a dream team. So, I mean, I think, if brands and companies start to recognize that there is not only uh, making our society equitable and providing opportunity to all, but in actuality will actually help their bottom line. I think it's a pretty compelling reason to do it ASAP if you want to stay ahead of the curve.
Wonderful. And I'm going to ask you my favorite question that we ask on the Spotlight sessions, which is when you hear the word accessibility, what comes to mind for you?
I think accessibility, I mean, I know I hate to define something by its opposite, but it's a lack of barriers. I mean, it's an even playing field. I mean, accessibility, and I'm going a little bit um, sort of cerebral on this, and I haven't thought it out entirely, but it was a great question, so I'm just going to go for it. Accessibility, I guess, in an ideal world, the word accessibility shouldn't exist because it should be the given. It only exists because there are barriers to it. So if we can remove those barriers, then accessibility is a norm as opposed to a goal that we strive for. So I don't know if that's a definition, but it's the best you're going to get from me off the cuff. It's a great question.
I think it's so great answer too. I mean, we set up the barriers that then create the conflict with accessibility. So I love that. Thank you so much. Are there any barriers with the digital space that come to mind for people with dyslexia?
I don't know how I entirely feel about AI. I have moments of inspiration and trepidation, but I do know that as long as the world is operating in a predominantly print-based, or shall I say text-based world, that the digital format allows greater accessibility through either speech to text, text to speech, or writing assistants like Grammarly and all the others. This, I think, mitigates one of the significant challenges of dyslexia. It doesn't eliminate it, but going back to the definition of accessible and removing of barriers, well, if we have an innate barrier to text in the written word, then these are tools that are mitigating that. I don't want to go too far afield as to, like, the acronyms that adolescents are using to communicate is probably not perpetuating proper grammar use. And I do subscribe to the fact that every dyslexic within their capabilities should learn to read, should learn to write, and use punctuation properly. But we should just use a lighter touch and a more supportive approach in order to get those kids what they need. Maybe one day the digital world, I don't know, maybe thought will be just transmitted virtually. Who knows? But for the time being, it's probably posing more good than bad in terms of leveling the text-based world.
I think that was an accurate answer in terms of there's so much more that we could be doing, but we also need to make sure that we're addressing the current issues and making sure that everyone is comfortable and it addresses everyone in an equitable way where it levels the playing field. So now I'll go into my final question for you today. And I'm sad about that because I've enjoyed this conversation, which is, can you tell me a little bit about a memorable experience or something that you're proud of from your time with NoticeAbility and leading this organization?
This is one example, but I feel blessed to say that it happens with more frequency than just this simply one time. But it's I remember working with a young student in Portugal, and it had been reported to me that this student was really a classroom challenge, shall we say, for the teacher, and really disengaged. And we conducted one of our workshops, which we were doing overseas, and this individual was in that workshop and was quite engaged during the process. But it was soon after that the teacher reported back to me and said that this young student had done a complete 180, that he had gone from being sort of riddled with self-doubt and self-loathing into this new sort of empowered stride with this little chest puffed out as you walk down the hall. And I guess, I lament the loss for the school, but it turns out that teacher actually left the school to become a NoticeAbility provider in Portugal. So I guess when you appeal to somebody who really knows what it's like to work with kids on a day-to-day basis, and we have somehow created something that this teacher saw had an impactful, tangible evidence on one student, and then compelled that teacher to such degree that he wanted to do more of that. It brought together that perfect union of student impact and an educator's willingness to try a new approach and then commit to a new approach. So again, that was special to me, very special.
That speaks volumes to the work that you're doing. So it was really great to hear that story. And thank you so much for being a guest on the Spotlight Sessions.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And to all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in. You can continue the conversation by subscribing and liking this channel, and also following us on Instagram at accessiBe_community. We'll see you there.